Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Megan Glova. When you think of cancer, you might not picture someone in their 20s or 30s, but more young adults in North Carolina are hearing that life-changing diagnosis. That's the focus of WRAL's latest documentary. WRAL documentary reporter Cristin Severance joins us now to dive into the topic and share the stories of some of these young adults. Cristin, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So if we could first talk about Hope Reynolds. She really stood out to me being the person diagnosed the youngest that you spoke to. What exactly is her story?
You know, Hope was 21.
So young.
A college athlete. She was a swimmer. She swam her entire life. Okay, this was a really healthy person. And she said she started noticing some changes about her body, but didn't really think anything of it. She said her and her roommate actually joked around about it, like, oh, that's weird. Something looks weird. But then she got really sick, bad migraines, could not eat anything. She called her mom. Her mom said, well, have you done a self-exam? And she thought, I'm 21. I don't have to worry about that yet.
Sure.
So she did. And then she found a lump. And when she called her doctor, who then referred her for a mammogram, the place said, oh, you're too young. You cannot get one.
Wow.
And that just goes to show you some of these, obstacles that these young people are facing. She was able to get a biopsy she was able to get an ultrasound. And that's when she learned that she was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Wow. No, you would never think, unless someone tells you otherwise, to even do a self-exam at that point.
Right.
So I don't blame her. I know when I was 21, I don't think I would be thinking to do so either. And, you also spoke with Bianca Harvey, diagnosed with colon cancer, and Matt Cross, diagnosed with testicular cancer. Before we get into their personal stories, why was it so important for you to find both men and women to talk to about this and people with different forms of cancer?
I just think when you take on this topic and you set out to do a documentary on more young people getting cancer, you want to show men, women, and different cancers, because it really isn't just, focused on one.
Right.
This really is happening across the board. And so that was important. And the personal stories really show that, these people were doing everything technically right. They were all athletes. Bianca Harvey was a personal trainer. She used to compete in bodybuilding shows.
Oh, my gosh.
And so healthy. Vibrant, young, and she started having really bad stomach pains, really bad. She couldn't work. She was working at a school and would have to sit down, would go in her car crying from pain. She saw doctor after doctor, specialist after specialist. They kept saying it was GERD, which is a type of stomach issue.
Okay.
That's not serious. And she said, this cannot be GERD. I can't walk.
Yeah.
And so finally she pushed and she was able to get seen and get that diagnosis.
Oh, my gosh. And how about Matt? Again, all young, all athletes here, and yet it seems like the common trend here, too, is that they felt some sort of pain that sent them there, that it maybe wasn't found by a doctor prior.
Exactly. Matt Cross coached youth hockey, played youth hockey, and now coaches youth hockey as his profession, moved here from Canada. He was visiting with his dad. His dad was in Raleigh visiting him, and his dad was having heart problems, and Matt's sister was having heart problems, and his dad was trying to connect the dots. So Matt put on his dad's Apple Watch and did the EKG reading, and it came back abnormal.
Oh,
so he
wow.
said, Dad, okay, I'll go to a general practitioner when you leave, I promise. And he did have a lump on his testicle, but didn't think anything of it. But when he went in, he asked, and then that's when he got his diagnosis. So I think yes, they have some pain. They either think it's not a big deal themselves or they're told it's not a big deal. And that is something I've really taken away from this. If you feel something isn't right, keep pushing, get that second opinion, go to someone else until you are satisfied.
Of course, the biggest question in this documentary we're trying to answer is why? So what were doctors able to share with you?
I think that's the most frustrating part in this for everyone. We don't know. Okay, doctors don't know, researchers don't know. But there are so many brilliant people here in North Carolina and across the country trying to figure it out. And they are doing clinical trials and they are doing studies and they're really looking at what is causing this. I think something I learned that was really interesting, it's not that just young people are getting cancer. The tumors are different. So someone with, uterine cancer at 80 and someone with uterine cancer in their 30s, the tumors themselves are different. So that leads doctors to believe, well, wait, there's something happening.
That's interesting.
In our environment, or there are several factors happening to cause the younger people to not just get cancer, but to have cancer that is different.
Right. Oh my gosh. And do they have any explanation for this at this point?
There are many theories, but one thing we spend a lot of time talking about in the documentary, food. There are, many researchers who believe that food, especially ultra-processed foods, really are leading to this, one factor leading to this.
Right. And what are some of the most maybe common examples of ultra-processed food, or even just some of the most recognizable that people currently have in their homes?
Right. So when you think of ultra-processed foods, and we hear about this so much, the best way to think of it, think of how the food started. Is it okay, let's talk about a potato.
Right.
Potato in the ground, grows in the ground. Then it is, taken to a factory. It's sliced up, lots of flavorings, lots of additives, and then it becomes a potato chip. So ultra-processed foods are foods manufactured. They're not made in your kitchen. So nothing really about them is natural.
Right.
And you think about healthy food, okay? You think about some of these meat alternatives.
Sure.
You're thinking you're doing the right thing. Well, that is the most processed you can get.
Oh, yeah.
And doctors say, and I would ask them, what is the food you stay away from? And they would say, sadly, it's some of their favorite foods. Bacon, processed meats really make them nervous. And I think it's important to look, they don't know for sure, but they're saying if you don't have ultra-processed foods at every single meal, you're going to be healthier.
Yes.
And the doctors themselves aren't cutting it out forever.
Oh, sure.
But they're saying, in the United States, we have no classification system. We have nothing saying this is ultra-processed. And so people could be eating that ultra-processed foods at every meal. Mm-hmm. And that's what doctors worry about. If you are eating it every meal, and then also the other things we don't know, right?
Sure.
Environment. Doctors have brought up microplastics. Duke is studying how the actual packaging of food, plastic packaging of food could, somehow impact our food before we put it in our bodies.
Right.
So there are so many things, but I think the ultra-processed food angle is very interesting because, again, if you limit that, even if it's not causing cancer, it's not going to hurt you to limit that.
Sure. And, on top of limiting maybe this ultra-processed food consumption, what do doctors recommend in terms of prevention? Because, again, a lot of these people you talk to, they were already feeling pain.
Right.
And then they went in and, luckily they're still here to tell us their stories.
I think it's daily choice. So when you're thinking about food, it's the daily choices made. Mm-hmm. Then there's also this aspect of demanding more transparency from our government, from places like the FDA. Why don't I know what's in my food? And then, to answer your question, it's listen to yourself, right? Listen to your body. And if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. And just keep going, right? Just keep going until you're satisfied. That's really what I took away from it.
Absolutely. Okay, Cristin, thanks so much. A very important topic here. And you can find Diagnosis Young up now on WRAL's YouTube channel. And you can also find more podcasts from WRAL News at WRAL.com. Search podcast. From sports to true crime, there are plenty of shows to keep you informed and entertained. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.